In the world of soccer, where every match captures the hearts of millions, some tragedies have deeply shaken us. Today we remember the soccer players and teams who tragically died in plane crashes. Their stories are not only a testament to their talent and perseverance, but also remind us of life's fragility. In this video, we pay tribute to these players and their unforgettable legacy, reflecting on the most deadly plane crashes in football history and their profound impact on the sport and its fans around the world. The first major airplane disaster involving a soccer team plunged Torino into deep mourning. During a flight from Portugal to Italy, after a friendly match against Benfica, things went terribly wrong. The flight ticket indicated that the players would fly from Barcelona to Milan, but that didn't happen. Instead, from Barcelona, they headed directly to Turin to save a bus trip from Milan. With a bit of luck, the passengers could have been home eating dinner with their loved ones that evening. However, the weather that day was far from optimal. It was raining and windy, and as the journey progressed, it also became foggy. Just before landing in Turin around 5 o'clock, the pilot contacted the control tower. "Get an espresso ready for me. I'll be there in a few minutes." Then there was silence. Around 5:05 p.m., the plane crashed into the hill beneath the Superga Basilica. All 31 people on board died, including nearly the entire AC Torino team. The 31 victims, including 18 players, 2 directors, 4 staff members, and 3 journalists, were buried 2 days later at the Palazzo Madama. Over 500,000 people paid their last respects to the team. Torino was posthumously awarded the championship title at the request of rival clubs. This tragedy is known as the Superga disaster. Il Grande Torino, then a team full of stars with international fame, made the impact of this disaster even greater. Because the crash wiped out almost the entire Torino team, other Italian clubs were asked to donate 1 player each for the 1949-50 season. In an instant, the fairy tale of Torino was over. In memory of the victims, here is a list of the people who lost their lives in this tragic disaster. Let's go back to a cold February day in 1958, a day that is deeply engraved in the history of football. At that time, a particularly young team shone under the guidance of coach Matt Busby, a team that stood out in both England and Europe for their play. They were known as the Busby Babes, named after their devoted manager. This team had just achieved a heroic 3-3 draw against Red Star Belgrade, securing their place in the semi-finals of the European Cup 1. The world was at their feet. The future looked bright. On their way back to England, their plane made a stopover in Munich. However, the snow-covered runway would play a fatal role. After 2 unsuccessful attempts to take off, a third attempt was decided upon. This time, it went horribly wrong. The plane could not gain enough speed and crashed through the fence at the end of the runway. A shockwave went through the world when the news became known. 23 of the 44 occupants did not survive the disaster, including 8 promising players from Manchester United and 8 journalists who shared their stories with the world. The team, which had so much potential, was destroyed in an instant. The players who died were young, talented, and at the beginning of a brilliant career. Matt Busby himself miraculously survived the disaster, although recovery would be long and painful. Despite his severe injuries, he returned to the field and built another team that would make history. His resilience and determination became a source of inspiration for many. At Old Trafford today stands a statue of Matt Busby, a tribute to a man who stood firm in both good and bad times. The legacy of the Busby Babes continues to resonate with football fans globally. They symbolize not only the promise of a glorious future that never became reality, but also the indestructible spirit of a club that continued to fight and ultimately rose to great heights again. Today, 66 years after that tragic day, we not only commemorate the loss, but also the legacy of a team that will forever live on in the annals of football. The 8 players who perished were Jeff Bent, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Duncan Edwards, Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, and Liam Whelan. Duncan Edwards, considered by many to be the finest player of his generation, died 15 days after the accident. In memory of all the victims, here is a list of the people who lost their lives in this tragic disaster. We will never forget. On July 16, 1960, members of the Danish national football team were on a Dragon Rapide plane that crashed in the strait separating Denmark and Sweden. The crash killed all 8 passengers on board, including 3 members of the national team. The pilot survived but required a leg amputation. May the victims rest in eternal peace. On December 8, 1987, a tragic event occurred involving an airplane carrying the Peruvian soccer team, Alianza Lima. After a 0-1 victory against Deportivo Pucallpa, Alianza Lima took the lead in the Peruvian League. The team chartered a flight back to Lima, but that flight never reached its destination. The Navy aircraft crashed into the Pacific Ocean near the Ventanilla district in the city of Callao, following confusion over the status of the landing gear. Of the 44 people on board, including players, coaches, staff members, cheerleaders, and crew, only the pilot survived. The pilot's inexperience and confusion during emergency procedures, as well as the poor condition of the aircraft, were later identified as causes of the tragedy. A plane crash in June 1989 also deeply affected the Dutch soccer community. The SLM disaster, the worst aviation tragedy in Surinamese history, occurred when a plane from the Surinamese Aviation Company crashed near Johan Adolf Pengel International Airport in Zanderij during a foggy landing. Out of 178 passengers, 167 did not survive the crash, along with all 9 crew members. On board was the Colorful Team, a group consisting of Dutch professional soccer players of Surinamese descent. 15 members of this team perished. Players like Stanley Menzo and Henny Meyer had fortunately taken an earlier flight and survived, though the impact of this tragedy was felt for many years. The Zambian soccer team was determined to perform well in the World Cup qualifier against Senegal. However, on March 27, 1993, during their flight, one of the plane's engines caught fire, leading to a tragic crash near Libreville, Gabon. All 30 passengers, including the entire Zambian squad, perished in the accident. Bwalya Kalusha, a top Zambian player, was not on board because he was still negotiating a contract with PSV, a major soccer club from the Netherlands. Charlie Musonda, a player for Anderlecht, was also not there due to an injury. All 30 people on board died in the crash. 24 bodies were recovered, but only 13 could be identified. May they all rest in peace and be remembered for their dedication and passion for the sport.
A plane crash has killed at least 75 people in Colombia. Many of them were young footballers on their way to playing the biggest game of their lives.
Chapecoense is a Brazilian football club that experienced a tragic plane crash in 2016. On November 28, 2016, their plane crashed near Medellin, Colombia. While the team was on their way to play in the final of the Copa Sudamericana, against Atlético Nacional. Out of the 77 people on board, 71 died, including 19 Chapecoense players. In this recording, you can hear the pilot speaking with air traffic control.
Lima India 2933 está en falla total, eléctrica total y combustible.
3 players survived the crash: Alan Rushell, Nito, and Jackson Fulman. Fulman later had to have his leg amputated. The disaster led to worldwide support, and Atlético Nacional requested that the Copa Sudamericana title be awarded to Chapecoense posthumously, which it was. Since then, the team has been rebuilt and continues to play competitive football, focusing on honoring the victims and improving their performance. Emiliano Sala was an Argentine footballer known for his talent and dedication on the field. In January 2019, after securing a transfer from French club Nantes to Cardiff City in the English Premier League, his life took a tragic turn. On January 21, 2019, the private plane carrying Sala to Cardiff disappeared over the English Channel. On the footage you see here, Emiliano is seen before departure at the airport, looking hopeful for his new chapter. Sala himself was also uneasy. From the plane, he sent a voice message to his friends saying he was scared.
Estoy acá arriba del avión que parece que se está por caer a pedazos y me estoy yendo para Cardiff, loco, que mañana sí, ya arrancamos. A la tarde arrancamos a entrenar, muchachos, con el nuevo equipo, a ver qué pasa. Así que, ¿cómo andan ustedes, hermanito? ¿Todo bien? Si en 1 hora y media no tienen novedades mías, no sé si van a mandar a alguien a buscarme porque no me van a encontrar, pero ya saben. Papá, qué miedo que tengo.
Just moments later, things really went wrong. Despite a massive search effort, the wreckage was only found weeks later on the seabed. Emiliano Sala's body was recovered, while the pilot, David Ibbotson, was never found. Sala's untimely death shocked the football world, casting a shadow over what should have been a bright new chapter in his career. As we close this tribute, let us honor the memories of those who played with passion and brought joy to countless fans. Their legacies are not defined by their final moments, but by the spirit and love they shared for the game. They remain forever in the hearts of their communities and the history of soccer. May their stories inspire resilience and remind us to cherish every moment of the game we love. Thank you for joining us in remembering these remarkable individuals.